Chapter 153 Shizun's Most Hated Sect Leader. Mad as Shu Meng might be, the group from Xisheng Peak still needed to be on their way. After bidding farewell to Mei Hanshua, they left Dai City, heading north and traveling for an hour, until they arrived at last at the foremost sect in the world, Linyi Rufeng Sect. Rufeng Sect, as its name implied, was situated within Linyi, within this vast city, with 72 manors of varying sizes, built in a continuous stretch. Each manor oversaw its own massive estate, so large that it would take an hour to travel across it on horseback. In fact, each of these manors was considered a city on its own right. The 72 cities of Rufeng Sect each had their own duties and clear-cut rankings. It was worlds apart from the hodgepodge melting pot that was Xisheng Peak. The two were in different leagues. Even Shu Meng, who despised the people of the upper cultivation realm, couldn't help his astonishment as he stood at the entrance of the cities. Rufeng Sect was said to be the epitome of the elite, privileged, and upper class. It seemed truer words had never been spoken. The city they'd arrived in was the main city, which was also the largest metropolis within Rufeng Sect. Its buildings, white-walled with black-tiled roofs, extended toward the skies, and the gates on the cardinal walls of the city were each flanked by towering, lofty watchtowers on each side. The main city gate was painted red and adorned with gold, and its road was at least 15 feet wide, a grand thoroughfare that stretched into the distance, which was pathed with chi refinement stones. With this, one could accumulate spiritual power by simply standing on the road. Although the effect of each individual rock was minimal, enough grains of sand would amass into a tower. Each one of these rocks cost over 1,000 gold. Must be nice to be rich. Chu Chengyong marveled. Madame Wang chuckled. If you had the money, would you also pave a chi refinement road for Xisheng Peak? Nah, I would pave a public square in every village in the lower cultivation realm. These rocks are full of spiritual power and can ward off minor ghosts and monsters. If every village had a square like this, its people would have a safe place to shelter during an attack till our disciples could get to them. Chu Chengyong made some tallies on his fingers, then shook his head. Too bad we can't afford it. Xisheng Peak, Shu Meng sighed along, is a little poor. Chu Chengyong nodded weightily. Oh, cultivation sects, yet Rufeng Sect is so rich. At this point, Chuaning, who had kept silent until now, spoke up. Sect leader, do you know how much Rufeng Sect charges to send out regular disciples for an exorcism? I've never asked. How much? Chuaning raised 4 fingers. 400 silver? Chu Chengyong's eyes were wide. So much? 4,000 gold. Chuaning replied. Chu Chengyong gaped, speechless. The upper cultivation realm is full of wealthy merchants, so money is easy to go by. How can you compete with them when you only charge 80 silver per request? Not to mention the requests for which you don't accept payment at all. Despite his blunt words, Chuaning's eyes were gentle. Come, let us enter the city. There was an accepted etiquette for prominent sects to receive guests, and the reception committee for Rufeng Sect had been waiting at the city gates for the past few days. Though they greeted all entrants with welcoming smiles, they were all well aware of the status and reputation of each arriving party. For rogue cultivators and small-town cultivators, the reception committee would give them a tour of the city, then guide them to their assigned rooms. Minor sects would be received directly by the warden, who was in charge of such things. When it came to Xisheng Peak, which had recently risen to become one of the 10 great sects, Rufeng Sect's reception committee didn't bother posturing. They were invited directly into a reception hall to await the arrival of Rufeng Sect's leader, Nangong Liu, who would come to personally greet them as the esteemed guest just as soon as he'd wrapped up his business. The air was thick with the fragrance of ambergris incense, the carpet on the floor so plush their feet sank in deep, and the reception room was abloom with tender, stunning camellias. One plant with 8 blooms, each of a different color, was called 8 Immortals Crossing the Sea. Another bearing white petals with flecks of red was called Blushing Maiden Clad in White. Yet another, with fine red veins spreading across the petals and leaves, was called Delicate Beauty Reclining. Chua Qingyong knew nothing of such things, but Madame Wang was aware that every single plant here was a cultivar of the highest quality. Shu Meng was as clueless as his dad. He spotted a charming camellia with a pair of black dots on its soft petals, and intrigued, he reached out to touch it. "Don't," Chuaning said. "Why?" Chuaning only shook his head. Madame Wang sighed and answered, "Precious treasures are a delight to the eyes. A flower like this sells for tens of thousands of gold." Aghast, Zhu Meng pulled his hand back, then dejectedly sat down in the plump, cushioned Taishi chair. He thought about the rankings book he'd found at the bookstall, and how furious he'd been when the list of the 100 richest heroes had excluded him. Now he realized the book hadn't lied. It was like his forehead was stamped with one giant gloomy word: poor. That reminded him, where had that book gotten to? He hadn't had the chance to finish flipping through it before it was lost. Before long, a curtain of red coral and freshwater pearls clacked as 2 elegant and dignified lady cultivators from Rufeng Sect stepped in, their snow-white silk celestial robes aflutter. One stood to the left and one to the right as they raised the beaded curtain. They lowered their eyes and curtsied, announcing in voices songbird sweet, "The esteemed sect leader has arrived." A man in his 40s strode in with a broad smile. He had a plain, somewhat bookish face, the kind easily forgotten in a crowd. Beyond the fact that his skin was exceptionally fair, his appearance was unremarkable. The instant he opened his mouth, however, Moran almost spat out the tea he'd been drinking. "Hiya, sect leader Zhuo, sect leader Zhuo. This humble one has been gazing at the stars, gazing at the moon, waiting for the moment your esteemed selves would finally call on Rufeng Sect. Look at you, dashing and spirited, mighty and magnificent, a hero of the world matched by no man. Excellent, fantastic. Your mere presence illuminates my humble abode. Good, good, good." Shu Meng and Moran looked on speechless. Although he was the leader of the foremost sect in the world, and although he was addressing the leader of the one ranked bottommost amongst the 10 great sects, here was Nangong Liu, obsequious and effusive, crying out "good" thrice in a row, each more fervent than the last. His liberal praise naturally pleased Chua Qingyong a great deal. No, sect leader Nangong is too gracious," he beamed back. "This humble one is not merely being polite. From the bottom of my heart, I am truly envious of sect leader Zhuo. The sect leader is a hero of our time, awe-inspiring, worthy of admiration. Look at this humble one. I've become so lazy and flabby in my old age. I surely cannot compare." Nangong Liu was so ecstatically warm that the peacock Chua Qingyong's tail feathers began to spread, despite his best efforts. Oh no, ha ha ha, sect leader Nangong, you're too generous." Moran had never crossed paths with Nangong Liu in his past life. When Moran had come to eradicate Rufeng Sect, the sect leader had fled. Moran cared nothing for such small fish and hadn't bothered to check if the man had died in a crossfire or managed to escape with his life and scrape out some further existence under a new name. This was the first time he'd ever been in the same room as Nangong Liu, and he found him distasteful just from his tone. He muttered under his breath, "Who knew the sect leader of the #1 sect in the world had such a silver tongue?" Shimeng heard him, and, in agreement with his cousin for once, whispered back, "You're right. That's what you call her real silver tongue. Tch, his words are so flowery, I can barely smell those expensive blooms over the cloying sweetness." Satisfied with his praise of the elder, Nangong Liu moved on to the offspring. "Aiyo, is this not the darling of the heavens, little Chuegongzi?" Shimeng might have been the dirt-poor young master, but he was not lacking in spirit. He cupped his hands without much enthusiasm. "Sect leader Nangong." "Truly a gallant youth, handsome, incredible. Look at this nose, those eyes. My, the spirit. Truly like father, like son." Shimeng was struck speechless. Nangong Liu turned back to Chu Chengyang. "Chu Shong, this humble one is ever so envious of you. What house in the world has a scion with half the mettle of your boy? I must say, there are so many outstanding young people in this vast cultivation world, but vanishing few who can match the son of yours." Shimeng had held out at first, determined to detest him, but Nangong Liu was completely oblivious to his cool attitude, catapulting so much enthusiastic, effusive praise at him that it knocked poor young Master Shure right off his feet and sent him reeling, until he eventually cracked a small smile. When he once more turned to whisper at Moran, he said, "This sect leader Nangong might be exaggerating a bit, but he speaks the truth." "What truth?" Moran looked sidelong at him in amusement. "That there's few who can match you?" "What? I'm telling you, at the Spiritual Mountain competition, I was—" "That was just one competition. Many of the rogue cultivators didn't participate. Did you really think the world's greatest would be found in that tiny scuffle of a competition?" Shimeng flushed and was silent for a long moment, before eventually grumbling indignantly, "Forget it. I know you're just jealous." Were he younger, Moran would have kept teasing him. Yet now that the words were on his tongue, he felt there was no point in arguing with Shimeng and that competitive narcissistic personality of his. So he nodded with a grin. Fine. I was jealous. You're the best." However, when Moran glanced back at Nangong Liu, the smile in his eyes faded completely. Many different types of villains walked this earth. Some were heinously depraved, their sins so grievous that all the world would clamor for their execution. Then there were those who were remarkable in another way. With their silver tongues and peerless talent for bootlicking, they could be rotten to the core and still not garner public scorn. In Moran's previous life, he was the former. Yet the ones he despised most were not those righteous few who'd fought against him. He didn't hate Mei Hanshur, he didn't hate Shimeng, he didn't hate Yi Wangxi, and in the case of the last, he even admired and pitied him. The ones he despised most were those like Nangong Liu, an ass-kisser who would kneel on the ground and lick another's hemorrhoid so long as there was something in it for him. Fuck, a hemorrhoid sucker even. Chuaning had been standing by the window since Nangong Liu's entrance, looking out at the organized rows of houses and splendid sights of Rufeng Sect. The winds were brisk at this altitude, and the soft, scented curtains that hung in the window drifted gently, obscuring Chuaning's figure in the gauzy haze. The fervent friendliness on Nangong Liu's face froze momentarily, but he quickly recovered and headed toward the window. "Chuzongshe!" Chuaning did not turn. His expression was indifferent as he said, "Sect leader Nangong, surely we know each other well enough that there's no need for introductions." Caught on the easterly breeze, the silk curtains, as soft as spring waters, brushed persistently against Chuaning's face. Irritated, he raised a hand to block the offending curtain, then said mildly, "You can dispense with the pleasantries." Nangong Liu smiled. This humble one only wanted to greet Chuzongshe, since it has been so long since we last met. "Zongshe, must we be so distant?" "I came for Nangong Xi's sake." Chuaning still didn't turn his head. Not for yours. Seer will be delighted to see you, even if you didn't take him as your disciple. You were his first teacher, after all. After you left, he often told me how he missed you. Chuaning made no reply. Encouraged by the lack of pushback, Nangong Liu continued. Zongshe, your impassioned and righteous actions at Butterfly Town during the events of the Heavenly Rift were inspirational. Though Master Huizui aided your return to the living world, I imagine you have yet to fully recover. Rufeng Sect has specially prepared 20 soul-nourishing pills of the highest quality for you to thank you on behalf of the entire cultivation realm. So please, do accept. Nangong Liu. Chuaning finally looked at him, but the way he addressed him had changed as well. He released the silk curtain and turned his straight-backed, slender silhouette, bleeding into the light streaming in from the window. His eyes were ablaze, his brows frigid, and his gaze terribly threatening. Do not place me on a pedestal. How can Rufeng Sect speak on behalf of all the cultivators in the world? Quite some nerve you have. The corners of Nangong Liu's mouth twitched, though he managed to keep his smile in place. At length he said, still smiling, There's no need to be like this. Chu Chengyang knew there was bad blood between Chuaning and Nangong Liu. In fact, this was something known to the whole of the cultivation world. When Chuaning was 15, Nangong Liu had invited him into the sect as a guest master, provided the utmost hospitality, and treated him like a god. Nevertheless, after only a few years, Chuaning had suddenly had a very public falling out with Nangong Liu, right in the middle of Rufeng Sect's Grand Hall. The two had exchanged words, saying things like Jincheng Lake, holy weapons, the lake monster's demand, morality and justice, ill for a long time, the madam, etc. All who witnessed the argument were left at a loss. What they did know was that at the end of it, an enraged Chuaning had slammed his hands on the table as he got up to leave. He had a stipend of tens of thousands of gold and received thousands of spiritual stones and talismans every month, but he refused to take so much as a single copper piece. He stood in the hall right in front of everybody and took off the Tiankun pouch tied at his waist, returning all those riches. Then, glowering and speaking not a single word, he removed that fine jade headpiece Nangong Liu had given him to welcome him as a guest master, letting his hair fall, and returned the headpiece to the reception official. This was a tale many of the storytellers of the lower cultivation realm told with relish. Nangong Liu was greatly upset, yet even then he tried to smooth things over. He said to Chu Zongshe, You've served the sect for so long, even if you must leave, at least let us compensate you properly. Rufeng Sect has no wish to be known as a sect that doesn't pay its dues. But Chu Zongshe replied, I have served the sect all these years solely to repay the madam's kindness of a meal. With her death, the esteemed sect and I have come to a crossroads. We have chosen different paths, and I have no intention of staying any longer. Keep your money. It would shame me to take it. Then he closed his eyes and turned back to leave Rufeng Sect. Chu Chengyang had thought the storytellers were exaggerating, so he'd once asked Chuaning what exactly Rufeng Sect had done to offend him. However, Chuaning did not like speaking about others behind their backs, so he'd only shaken his head and refused to give any details. But if the scene unfolding before them was any indication, it would appear the storytellers had uttered not a word of lie. Seeing how tense the situation had become, Madame Wang stepped forward to make peace. She said gently, Yuheng Elder, please calm yourself. It's not good for your health. She then turned and bowed respectfully to Nangong Liu. Nangong Xianzhen, we appreciate your kind gesture, but Xisheng Peak does not lack for spiritual stones and valuable medicine. We cannot accept your soul-nourishing pills. Nangong Liu seized the chance to disengage and, after a beat, chuckled and said, "Madam is right. I was thoughtless. Yuheng Elder, forgive me. Please, don't take it to heart." Moran watched all this and thought, Shizun totally flung cold water in this guy's face, and still he smiled so easily. Amazing. He took a sip of his Richao green tea. Yet who would have thought? In the brief moment he looked down to sip his tea, Nangong Liu had come before him, bearing a wide grin.